So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote presentation for the day, titled The Danger of Lost History. We are very privileged to have Jason Scott with us. Jason Scott is the free-range archivist at the Internet Archive, where is also the software curator and oversees multiple projects, including in-browser emulation and uploading ephemera from all corners of culture. He is also a documentary filmmaker, the director of Bbs the Documentary, Get Lamp, and DEF CON the Documentary, and founded the history site textfiles.com 20 years ago as of this coming October. So please join me in welcoming Jason Scott.
I'm actually fascinated to know for how many people today is the first time you've encountered me in any way whatsoever? Okay, and I probably need the inverse. How many of you know me from the past 5 years? And then how many of you know me from before 2010? All right, you're in for a ride. Fantastic. So a huge thank you to the organizers of this event. Let me just make sure this does what it's supposed to. A huge thank you to the organizers of this event. Thanks to Megan for talking me into doing this. And to everybody who's working just so very hard for an event like this. I know the difficulties that go on, the little tiny annoyances and pleasantries that happen behind the scenes. And I'm glad that everyone is working very hard towards their goals. I'm also very amused and pleased because this is actually one of several times I've been invited to events and then disinvited. There was a Wikipedia event I was invited to about a year and some odd change ago, in which the person was very happy to invite me, and I said, great, when they cancel, I'd like to talk with you about this other project of something you work in. He said, oh, they're not going to cancel. And 7 days before the event, I got the tearful 14-paragraph explanation of why I wasn't going to be speaking. I actually had another open culture event do the same thing, describe that I was going to be there, and then a few days before, ask me for the full contents of my speech, a level of pre-check that nobody else got. Now you're wondering what's going on. Okay, so from 2004 to 2007, I was one of the preeminent critics of Wikipedia. If the reporters wanted to get a quick and easy fun quote, they went to me. I had all sorts of phrases right off the tip of my tongue, all sorts of things I would say. I called Wikipedia an inefficient machine that uses children as fuel. Stuff that just flies right off the page, right? I wrote an essay called The Great Failure of Wikipedia, and I wrote a bunch of other things, and for a short period of time I was flown around to the places of publishers and others to make them all feel better that this new Wikipedia thing was just some sort of odd fad that was going to go away, and don't worry, keep everything going, keep your heads down, we'll get through this together. So it's been many, many years since that. I quote-unquote retired in 2007. So I haven't really done much writing in the way of Wikipedia in those years hence. So in this talk, I want to talk a little bit about what led me to that and what took me away from that, and the lessons that I've learned and why I still think it's useful and why I still use Wikipedia many times a day. So I'm known for having a site called textfiles.com, and textfiles.com has been around since 1998. It is a collection of bulletin board system era text files. How many people here ever called the BBS? Wonderful. And a bulletin board system is a machine with a phone-connected line to it that is run by a lonely person. And that person has other people call into their line to leave messages and disagree about things, and then the lonely person tries to respond to them. And sometimes people who use it get inspired to do their own. And these flourished heavily from late 1978 till roughly 1995, when the internet and multi-user Windows and everything started to really pull that group away to the next big thing. But they flourished wonderfully, and they are the predecessor of a lot of the things that we see now on the internet, just writ small. You know, a bulletin board system might only get maybe 100 messages a day if it was an unbelievable, rocking Reddit-level place. Most would be lucky to get 12 messages a day. Similarly, they would write files to each other. And by that, I mean that a person would, instead of having to write the same message over and over, would write a how-to file or a file about some piece of information, and they would put it on a listing. On Apple IIs, you had to press G for general files, and they became known as G files. But in other places, they were just called text files. As it moved to the 90s, they became known as texts, or files with a Z. And in these are the history of the human race coming online. I mean, certainly engineers had been online throughout the 1950s and forward in experimental processes, speaking to people exactly like themselves. But by the time we got to the 80s, you were able to go down to a variety of stores that are now completely closed and buy computers for a few $100s and join this revolution that felt like it was coming at any given moment. So there was a real sense of wonder, but also there were these files. And as a child, I was fascinated by the files more than the messages, so I collected many of them by the thousands. And so I ended up having a large collection of text files. And the lives of bulletin board systems are nasty, brutish, and short. They wouldn't last for very long. They were fads, they were weird, they were fun, it was very expensive, so they disappeared. And I recognized how transient that world was, because my own world had been transient. A child of divorce, a child who'd been abducted, a child who had been known that every single institution that mattered in his life might fall at any given moment, and that level of paranoia meant that I was very, very constricted in terms of believing in others and trusting. So I captured all these text files and kept them away. And in the late 1990s, after the thrill of the internet, I wondered, hey, did anyone remember how awesome those bulletin board systems were? And to my great surprise, few did. And by saying few did, I meant that there wasn't a resource online to get to them. People remembered them if they were told about them, but there wasn't a place to go. So I formed textfiles.com, put up 50,000 text files that I had collected over the years, and that site remains to this day. It is an artifact of its time. It represents something like 15 to 20 years of the experimentation of the human condition going online. And as a result, it is both compatible and incompatible with the modern era. Besides having a whole variety of amusements and jokes, some of which still go to this day, it also has files on anarchy, sex, phone phreaking, hacking, destruction, violence, smashing the state, bringing things together, splitting things apart, and burning an anarchy symbol in your front driveway. So this site is both liked and hated for that reason. And over the years, I've certainly gotten phone calls and responses for having it. But like I said, I was scared about it not existing. It also means that I have a very, very strong resistance to not so much change, but change for the sake of plowing under what once was to claim that what's new is the ever living present. So, after the bulletin board system site went up, I got a lot of contact from human beings saying, whoa, I remember that, and then would follow the story. I'd get like a 4 or 5 paragraph biographical sketch of a person's life. And people are very similar, but they also have a whole range of interesting things that they've done around these computers that were joining their lives. And I had a dormant film degree, so I started filming them. And 4 years later, having interviewed 201 people, I created Bbs the Documentary, which is a Creative Commons licensed documentary up on the Internet Archive and also on YouTube and spread everywhere. And it is an exploration of what these bulletin board systems were. And they were very important to me because primary sources of an oral history are where we get actual unvarnished facts, or at least unvarnished viewpoints that we can work from. During the filming of the BBS documentary, I met a guy named Maury, and he was wonderful. It was a good interview. He remembered things wonderfully, and he said to me, "Oh, I'll mention what you're doing on the wiki." And I was like, "The wiki?" And he was like, "Yeah, there's this thing called Wikipedia." And I was like, "Well, that's quite a name. What is it?" And he's like, "Let me show you." And he went over and he showed me Wikipedia. Now, I'd been on a wiki earlier. I'd been on a collaborative editing system of about 12 people. And I had felt a lot of the drive that enthuses you in using a wiki, that sense of putting down a piece of language or words and then coming back the next day to find them having been picked up and polished and improved, and worlds built on your words, and the fact that the things you find bring light to a whole range of dark subjects, and then suddenly they're illuminated and the world understands them. And then having that imbued sense of being part of the reference material, not just an opinion, but a built-in reference, is an exciting shot of dopamine that does not go away easily. So, I thought it was interesting. So I was playing with it like you play with a lot of technological toys, and then kind of let it just kind of fade into the other work I was doing because I was editing a movie. Now, different people have different experiences when they end up on Wikipedia. And because of textfiles.com and because of the BBS documentary, I got to be in Wikipedia. Somebody created an entry for me. It is a very different experience to edit Wikipedia and be on Wikipedia. It is the world's ugliest star chamber, where you stand in a spotlight and a bunch of people you don't know debate whether you are worth being in the view of history. And then to watch the inevitable lawyering over what aspects of you qualify and whether or not they fulfill this set of ever-changing rules to make you valid. And if you're foolish enough to watch it in real time, you will watch swaths of information arrive and then be dismissed by, who's this guy? Who's this person? Who are these people? And then left away. And I had described it at the time of that feeling at work when someone you don't know who doesn't get what you do tells you what to do. If you want the experience of having that done to you 24/7, there's a website for you. Most impressively, they outed my real name. So my real name is not Jason Scott, and they put my real name up there, something I had been working pretty hard to protect, because if you put bomb files on the internet, you do make yourself a bit of a target for others to have their opinions on you and how to find you. I was somebody who, during their BBS days, had somebody tell me which windows I was standing in my house, so they would tell me when the bullet came, I'd know why. So I was quite aware of how things could go pretty badly. Deleting my name was against the rules. Removing my name was considered to be inaccurate, and people would put it back. I would have huge arguments with this. I did things to the people who kept putting my name back, but there were more of them. There's always more. So that caused me to not be as much of a fan. So when you work from the point of view of not being a fan, you then start to say, well, what bothers you about the organization? And again, this is all some time ago. You are not those people. I love you. So part of what bothered me was that I see a lot of wasted energy. I see a lot of cases where somebody will say to me, back when people debated with me, which doesn't happen anymore, thank goodness, but they would say, Jason, look at how wonderful it is. Look at this, this, this. And I'm go, you're showing me a doghouse. And you say, isn't it amazing that the community built a doghouse? But you need to realize that's the 100th doghouse that has been built in that spot over 100 times and has had 15 different materials, and at one point was the size of a mansion, and at one point was the size of a dollhouse, and now is that again. Huge amounts of energy. And what bothered me was the opinion of multiple people who ran it were basically, who cares? There's plenty more where that came from. It's the attitude of the settlers who were like, there'll always be buffalo. There'll always be excited people who will want to edit us, so why not just keep going? But in terms of the rest of it, I was pleased. In one speech, I called it a dark mirror held up to humanity. Because what it did, and this is what it did do, and I was very pleased about this, it brought into our language an entire lexicon of terms and glossary meanings that we wouldn't have to fight in the now ever-present constant information war that is being waged daily. We had the term sock puppet. We had the term neutrality. We had terms of notability, but more about notability, about terms of process that just did not exist in any meaningful way and had not been agreed upon. And it's made, as bad as things are now in the modern internet, they could have been so much worse, and many years hence. So in that way, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful beta test for what humanity does when you stick it in the same pit and really shake it. Really shake it down. So I was pleased about that. And like I said, there was some fun in making fun of Wikipedia. There was certainly a lot of joy in it in terms of I love saying crazy things on stage, and there was always something to talk about. Does anybody here remember the teddy bear war? How many people know Teddy Bear War? Okay, you'll look it up because I know you will. So Wikipedia, this is my description of it. I'm sure somebody else can have their own description. Does everyone here know what 2257 requirements are? No. Okay. 2257 requirements are the requirements that if you put up somebody who is naked, you have to have at a location that is available from 8 in the morning till 5 at night on a regular street address with their name and address available. That's an American thing. God bless America. What do the porn companies do? They hire companies whose entire job is to be a storefront, usually in Florida, to come over and pick up that piece. So Wikipedia had a lot of nudity, and one day they decided they shouldn't. So they switched to drawings. And that's fine. But it meant that there was a gap, a vacuum. And so there was one person, and I'll always love this person. It's one of the figures I'll always remember from back then. He would go in and he would draw sexual positions with the clarity and the wonder of the joy of sex. He was very, very good at what he did. But he also was funny. He was funny. So he'd put a Linux book in the middle of it, or a teddy bear. One day, somebody deleted the teddy bear and put it up again. And the person said, and someone else, you've all been in this conversation, said, "Why?" And he went, "Because the teddy bear makes it child pornography." And they went, "It's a drawing. Doesn't matter." So they put the teddy bear back. Then they took the teddy bear away. I believe it was 18 months of this quantum teddy bear involving many dozens of people over the future fate of this invisible teddy bear living in this sex drawing. So no, there's definitely plenty to be amused about, and there's plenty to enjoy. Certainly with a sports piece. But there's also was a sense of seriousness that also disturbed me. And the reason that it disturbed me was because you were giving people agency, which is a fantastic thing, by the way. I love that. I love doing my best in my life to give people a sense of self-control and the ability to derive their own opinions. My path may be different, but I believe in that so strongly. If nothing else, please remember I do believe that. But one of the things that Wikipedia did was it made everybody who edited Wikipedia feel like they were a member of Wikipedia, and more importantly, that they were a staff member of Wikipedia. And and this is also something that's lost, for a while, and we're talking 2003, 2005, there was a belief that Wikifcation of all information sources was the one true path to all knowledge, everywhere, in all cases. A belief that news articles should be able to be wikified, a belief that any website that didn't have a wiki running on it was in some way failing us, that all of the institutions of dictionaries, encyclopedias, and reference materials were sad shadows of what could be in the light of the wiki. That really bothered me. There was one study by Nature that wasn't a very good study that was held up endlessly as proof that wikis were better than encyclopedias. I mean, all of these sources have flaws, but it was this sense of that. And we see that again today in the era of Uber and WeWork and others, which say, this is the natural way of things. Please stand back from the grinding of our machines to turn us into the new light of the self-directed economy, of the Fiverr economy, that every single thing you do can be replaced by a person for $5 in another country, which is less than $5, or a sense that anybody who has a car is better than any sort of regulated material, and those regulations are in the way and are miserable boundaries to our true light. So we do this a lot. Wikipedia had that back in 2003. I'm happy that that's not the case anymore. Wikipedia is a voice in a cacophony. It's a strong voice, a very strong voice. And it's a voice that I listen to, by the way. Like I said, I am now a fervent user of Wikipedia. Wikipedia tells me who's married to this person that I'm reading about, which is something I use a lot for some reason. I was trying to determine what do I use it more for, and it's because there'll be a famous person. I'll be like, what's up with them? Who was their dad? I don't know why. I really need to know that a lot. A lot. I know everyone's dad. And so for me, that's what I use it for. I also use it for comic book condensed plot lines because I can't follow them. We each come from it from a different position, correct? All right. Anyway, in 2007, I retired from being a critic. Why? Well, partially because I think Wikipedia had lost that one bizarre zealotry veneer of being the one true end of everything, and everyone understood it was another way of looking at information, and that collaboration has its ups and downs, and that properly held together, it can really be a good tool. But just like we don't need to compile nature, we don't need to compile everything else. And so I retired because I realized that I was living my life as a negation. This is the cancer that really wrecks me now when you'll see a Twitter account that's not a bot, and you realize all this person does is hate things. And you're like sad initially, but then you're like, wow, what amazing effort to wake up every day, really hate Obama, seek out pictures that are not complimentary to Obama, and tell the 14 people who follow you that you found the picture. Every day. At some point, that eats up your relationship to humanity. If all you can do is stand outside the effort of others and say, no, eventually, the sum total of your accomplishment will be a pile of bones outside of that institution that somebody will point to and say, don't go near the boneyard. It's hard to walk through. You will not have accomplished anything. And I felt that. I felt that life, that negation, was not for me. Wikipedia would live or die or change or fix on its own. But if all I was not the Wikipedia, that would be a sad life. So I refocused, and I refocused on working on other things. And so I both worked on another documentary, And in 2008 and 9, I lucked into a organization, an activist group really, that's still around, that is one of my proudest accomplishments, and that was the co-founding of something called the Archive Team. The Archive Team at archiveteam.org is a rogue archivist collective that fights to save and preserve constantly dying websites and communities. We became famous first for the fact that we backed up GeoCities when it went down. We became famous for the fact that we did some work with MobileMe. We have grabbed Gawker. We have grabbed a variety of these sites. We grab hundreds of gigabytes a day of websites that are being deleted, that are at risk, that are being threatened. And it grew from a handful of people to something like several hundred today. And it has a progressive amount of technology that's used to ensure that the inevitable destruction of websites, which themselves are in many cases synthetic community skeletons that unintentionally grow the skin of a real community until one day people realize their skeleton is gone, and preserving them for the future. Like I said, this talk was about history and the danger of deletion. And when we lose our history, we live in an eternal, constant present at which everything we do can be judged as being what's happening now, with no evidence or exception to the fact that maybe we could have done things a little bit differently. And the more that we do that, the more that we insist on moving from place to place, the more that we lose who we are. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of going down that weird road with an elderly relative and suddenly discovering, like I did, that my grandmother, who I knew as a relatively elderly, pleasant lady who did work as a prison warden, was also a seamstress and could speak 5 languages and was the hub for multiple communities where they would mail her letters in different languages to translate for their relatives. Had no idea. I found that out when she was 85. And that there's all this history that gets kind of plowed over for the new that you get into a danger with. So one of the myths of Wikipedia is its permanence. It is a constantly changing organization and a constantly changing event. And one of the illusions is that information is permanent. You know, we discover very quickly how fast we can change our opinion. You know, the current Twitter trends are exposing that, you know, where people that we thought were one thing are another, and places that we thought functioned one way function entirely other ways. And there's, I guess, schadenfreude in terms of enjoying watching them fall or trip or whatever, but it really speaks to the fact that we are incredibly liquid, and Wikipedia is liquid too. So in this interim present day, the only issue I have remaining with Wikipedia is its deletionism. I was fascinated in 2003 and 2004 that deletionism and inclusionism became 2 of the warring religions that were fighting daily on Wikipedia. It was a fascinating way. You could not have asked more from like a good science fiction novel. That the 2 true fights would not be big endian, little endian, but in fact would be, we got to keep everything, we have to constantly get rid of things as they become useless or not worthy, and that those 2 groups would become a fight that would never end. I was a hardcore inclusionist. I'd worked for textfiles.com. I never deleted a text file. And due to the work of Archive Team, I had seen the danger of deletionism up close. How much information depended on information buried on GeoCities pages, you know? Everything from elderly people giving their histories on GeoCities pages and then deleting them when GeoCities went down. Or when we put them back up again, having mothers who had put up the only photos of their children on GeoCities and then had lost their passwords and then contacted us and got their pictures back. We did this all the time. And we build it on, you know, websites are not dependable. I trust none of them. I never trust any of them. no matter how much they smile, no matter how pretty their brand is, somewhere down there is somebody faking it till they make it. And so I've never been convinced differently. What does this mean to you? Well, several things. First of all, I still wish that Wikipedia would really remove the fact that it allows deleting as much as it does creating. It should be a painful situation, similar to organ donation, to delete something. That should be considered to be a failure on the part of the organization to have recognized this item that doesn't exist here and is problematic and should go away. It shouldn't be a case of someone going, I got rid of 10 useless articles today. I've been to the notability discussions. It's often one person saying it should go away and another person saying, I agree with you, and it going away. It has a sense of a small town court with a very, very friendly prosecutor and judge. But that's only because it's so easy. I think if we did that, we would discover how much was lost, how much has already been lost. I mean, obviously there's efforts to keep it going, but that's where I stand on it. That's my only remaining complaint. It's my only remaining complaint, okay? So in 2011, I had been running with Archive team for a while, and I'd been running textfiles.com, and they were mostly primary source collections, right? Tons of the original files, which I could attest, tons of original websites, which we could attest. And I was hired by the largest, one of the largest open primary source collections, the Internet Archive. And this has been a love story greater than Romeo and Juliet. I don't know which one of those I am yet. But Internet Archive at archive.org is a nonprofit library that is dedicated to the dissemination and open access to knowledge. It is run by a crazy guy named Brewster Kahle, who in 1996, finding himself rich beyond dreams and deciding not to go to the secret restaurants where they serve endangered species or to go to an island you've never heard of, said, I think I want to be a librarian. And I cannot tell you the strength of will of a person with that net worth coming in every morning to a building to type on a computer and be a librarian every day. But he does. And if you spend any time with him, he burns with the passion of 1,000 suns. I am a cinder compared to Brewster. He is an unstoppable force, and he's been doing this job at my job at Internet Archive for 20 plus years. And he has always taken joy from books and information and websites. And the Wayback Machine, which is how most people know folks, is in some ways, unfortunately, the memory of the internet, the proof this once happened, the example this once was. And in a move that I think is brilliant, the Internet Archive and Wikipedia have created a bot together that when a site is linked to from Wikipedia, it is immediately archived by the Wayback Machine, such that over time, if that citation dies, it will be replaced by the Wikipedia Wayback, ensuring that someone can't just go, well, this is a bunch of dead links, delete this article. So that's an incredible thing. And there's people who are working on it all the time because it's a technical nightmare. And it's a brilliant piece of work. And I would love to see more of those things happen. It is the Internet Archive is known for the Wayback Machine, but it also has thousands upon thousands of movies, of music, of books, of ephemera. I collect a lot of ephemera. When I was brought on, one of my jobs was software, but I discovered that software wasn't very readable. So we created an in-browser emulator, so you can go to the Internet Archive, go to the Internet Arcade, click on an arcade machine, and start playing it. We can also do it for console games, for Apple IIs, for Macintoshes. We have thousands upon thousands of functioning, running hypercard stacks. We are involved in trying to bring back this digital history so that it is as live and meaningful as everything else. So it's been a wonderful journey. So I'm also a New Yorker. I was born in Hudson Valley, which I guess makes me not entirely a New Yorker, but I was born in Hudson Valley in Hopewell Junction, if anyone knows where that is. Population 400, thank you. And when the parents divorced, I bumped between a couple of wonderful cities, including Brewster and Chappaqua and Mount Kisco, and I loved that place. And New York was the city was a fascinating place that I would dip into in my teens. I came down here for an off-Broadway show about hackers from 1983. I came down here for a Roger Waters concert. I would come, I'd come down and it would be an adventure with my family to come down here. And when I went to school in Boston, and I lived in Boston for 20 years. Boo! And so after about 20 years, I fell in love here and moved back. And I've been living here for about 8 or 9 years. And I come here and I got to rediscover, the results of the scourings of the 90s had turned this place into a very safe and wonderful place to visit, while still maintaining many of the wonders of how it just does not give a crap about anything and just gets going. I drive here, boo, and when I go to California, I'm bringing a knife to a spoon fight because I have been tempered in the blazing lava of New York taxi drivers, letting me know that Newtonian law is not their law. And I also can speak of the ones that most people outside the city don't know, the most dangerous creature of all. We know the lion isn't the most dangerous creature. The most dangerous creature is the unmarked white delivery van with all 4 of its corners smashed with the skulls of its enemies, knowing that the person in there who does not own the van, who doesn't have the thing, has to get things delivered in 10 minutes or they are fired. And they will be eaten by the city like a dead creature on the side of an ant colony in minutes. Or that fascinating, wonderful experience of a bodega owner handling 4 customers in a row by shoving the change into the face of the person while grabbing the items of the next one, slamming it down, doing the calculation while turning to the next guy to ask him if he's got everything. You don't see that in many places. I love this city, and I want the world to know about it. More than just tragedy and weirdness and brutality, but the richness of the monuments and the parks and the buildings and the people within it. It is such a lovely set of contrasts. I have walked through Times Square and been blown away by all the tourists, only to turn and watch a half-naked person literally screaming about bugs. And then I've been able to go to a concert where a person I could have never dreamed I would be in the same room with makes us laugh and forget everything for 2 minutes inside of a room that should not exist on Earth. It's a wonderful city. I've been out to the many different boroughs. I've been to the, up and down every weird highway, every odd intersection. It's a beautiful place, and I think that a community like this that gets together and edits about it, that lets people know about it, especially if they're willing to battle others who tell them it's not notable, will be one that's accomplished something really, truly interesting and special. I really hope that people continue to do that. It's, you know, this is a place where, for instance, I was one of the few people, or one of the many people who didn't know about Adam Purple until he died. That's a terrible time to learn about how great and interesting a story is. I didn't know about the Garden of Eden. You know, just going down that rat hole of learning about the Garden of Eden, and along with it, the world of experiencing the tenements that are blown out and that whole aspect of the city, that is a rich history worthy of a Greek epic, right? It's an amazing kind of commentary on what cities can do when they grow and die and are reborn. You know, as we're closing up a bunch of things, as places go away, the Internet Archive will do its part. We have a 7-year collection of East Village Radio. We collected all of their MP3s off their site before they died. We are doing our best with the present. We currently grab all satellite channels 24/7. If you go to archive.org/TV, you can type in a word and see any time that word is mentioned by a news program in the last 8 years. We grab 11,000 hours of radio a day. We're constantly trying to build that primary source, that referenceable material, and we're trying to make it citable on Wikipedia. So if you look through the archive, just this last year, okay, so things do change. This last fall, we added a full text search to everything that has been OCR'd on the archive. Just click on the search thing, click on full text, and you can find out any time a magazine, a newspaper, anything we have that has text on it mentions that word. So you can have that citation that you need, because I've discovered that citation needed is the way to go. So I'm bullish. I'm excited to see what you do. I'm excited to see where it goes. I also recognize that I have lived a life of privilege. I've been very lucky. I've had a lot of good things happen to me. I'm currently famous for something positive, which is nice. I'm also somebody who has benefited from a bunch of hands, both visible and invisible, throughout my life, and I recognize that. So wherever I can, I will do my best to help and give voice to people who don't have that luck, who have not gotten that easy leg up when they needed it most. Whether I follow through is something for people to keep an eye on, but I will say that it's my goal, and I hope that others do as well. So, again, enjoy your day. Have a wonderful time. Thanks so much for having me, and yeah. Thank you so much. Does anybody have a question?
Could you give an example of what the criteria?
I'll just repeat her. You don't have to run around. Go ahead again. Can I give an example of what?
I'd like to know the criteria that Wikipedia uses to justify the deletion. Just an example.
Okay, so you're going to ask a vegetarian why meat is so delicious. Her question was, what are the criteria used for deleting? And again, I think that it's unfair to have me be the sole voice on this, so others you should definitely ask.
It's an objective fact. It's not a subjective thing. It's an objective fact. They must have certain stated criteria.
You would think they would have an objective criteria, but Wikipedia, like Soylent, is made of people. And people come at things from different range. So there's a variety of rules, for instance, like you're thinking of, notability, whether or not it rises to the level of being an encyclopedic subject. Neutrality, whether or not it's just simply a statement of opinion. You know, if you make an entry called, you know, whatever, this group is awful. And they'll say, well, we're going to delete the this group is awful subject. That's not a subject.
You're saying they have no stated stringent set of criteria.
They do have a set of criteria, but it is wikified. Oh. Oh. Have you used Wikipedia? Okay.
I started using it after I came to the last week.
Okay. How's it been working out for you? Great? I mean, as an information source, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And like a lot of processes, it has a lot of people who work to make it that way.
It was like scumbag, but when I came to the conference, I realized it was serious people involved.
People are very serious about Wikipedia, yeah.
No, I don't mean that.
But-
I mean the quality.
Right. No, they take it very seriously. They are trying to build the new range of information for a variety of subjects that were not always blessed by certain institutional needs to recount them. You don't become a critic of Wikipedia without understanding Wikipedia, but I would say that if you're interested in that process, it is well documented on there. There are lots, if you drop over to the parts about Wikipedia's process, and I'm sure many people here can link it to you better than me, whatever the current links are. The nice thing about the organization is that a lot of its work is at least nominally transparent. You can't function and make actions happen in terms of the Wikipedia content.
I never knew about the deleting until you mentioned it.
Oh, okay, we have another question, but
Yeah. Hey, so first of all, thumbs up on BBS, big fan.
Wonderful.
But I was wondering how you would distinguish the purposes of archives versus encyclopedias being sort of a central question of notability, or if there is a difference for your purposes.
Sure. Now, I also have to tell you that I'm a relatively controversial figure. So sometimes there's a danger because people will say that, oh, this is the world's most famous librarian or the world's most famous archivist, and I can literally hear the screeching sound of fingernails digging into hands from professional archivists and librarians. So I've really tried to kind of push out the fact that I'm kind of like the mass media showman, and that people who do work of a certain range and do it in other ones will go, he's kind of right, but let me walk you through the change. So at least I've brought attention to things that I think are meaningful, but I would hate to consider myself to be the be-all, end-all, and nobody should. In terms of archives versus encyclopedias, well, encyclopedias originally worked off the function that there was an actual maintainable way to have all of the important knowledge, right? 4chan, you thought you'd ever hear 4chan discussed today. 4chan created a torrent called All You Need to Know. It's a 100 gigabyte pirate torrent of books, everything on math and social sciences and everything. It's from a bunch of dangerous, weird, stupid people, but functionally, it is true that the human spirit wants to know that there's something they can hold to ensure that, at least as close as their own heart, they can have an understanding of the world. That's one of the core things that drives us. And from that is the belief that observation and understanding and working with others can maybe make that knowledge better. And so an encyclopedia will be a way to curate that knowledge in such a way that it allows a person to relatively easily become good enough informed on a subject to be able to make an informed decision, opinion, reference, or otherwise. An archive functions as being a place to hold primary materials or referenced materials in such a way that connections, importance, and others can be derived later. So instead of deciding that there are 9 butterflies, better to keep 150,000 different species of butterfly because we won't know which ones are going to be the ones we need to know about, or to have to prove that there were 150,000 species of butterfly at one point. That's my own personal definition. I do not pretend it is the only universal one. Anybody else? And let me know when we've gone too far. Oh, yes.
So when running the Internet Archive, how do you deal with copyright issues?
Okay, I don't run the Internet Archive. I'm an employee of the Internet Archive. I'm also not a lawyer, so I don't really discuss legal aspects or administrative aspects. I'm an employee there. I would hate for somebody, I see that sometimes and I run for it. It's just because I'm very visible. The Internet Archive respects the DMCA, so people send us DMCAs and we respond to them quickly. Digital Millennium Copyright request. It basically, yeah, it's a functional library functioning as a nonprofit. We're a member of the, we are a recognized library by the state of California. So we function along that way. I will say copyright's a real mess in this country. And and people who are fighting for copyright reform are not weird zealots in terms of it. They are functionally looking at weirdness. And, unfortunately, if you let corporations run the country, things will tend to get rather corporate on your governmental side. You'll start to say, well, of course this terrible thing will happen. Otherwise, what of the profit? And so, but again, that's not the opinion of the archive. That's just me.
Okay, I guess first of all, nice to see someone else from the Hudson Valley out here. I live in Walden, so I know where Hopewell Junction is.
They steal all our chickens.
Anyway, but you talked about the changes that Wikipedia went through in between, say, 2005 and 2007 as sort of beginning to blunt your criticism, and that period coincides with my first years on Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a lot of changes myself then. I'm just curious to see if you could point to any specific things that happened during that period as beginning to change your view.
Probably SJ. Probably the SJ controversy. How many people here know the SJ controversy? Yeah, okay. Good. Good that some of you know. Go ahead and look up the SJ controversy. ESSJAY, the very short term, the very short answer in the way of like saying The Wire is about crime in Baltimore, is that SJ was a professor who was editing a large variety of articles and had gone up the ranks to become a rather powerful Wikipedian and had been teaching classes and was an incredible held-up figure. And it was eventually revealed that SJ was a 20-year-old student who had been just kind of faking it till he made it. And he had seriously made it. He had amazing power. And of course, since Wikipedia is good at research, they went back and he, of course, went into that great spiral we see in the gotcha world, right? Gotchas are always great. That first statement that comes out from the person who's been gotcha'd is always a crystalline, perfect form of weird half-lie that just gets knocked down. And one of the things he said was, well, I never used my supposed professorship as a point of authority. Yeah, of course he did. But my favorite line was, like, this book is incredible. I recommend it to all of my students. This is just some student. Anyway, I think that opened up eyes to a lot of people that the system could be majorly gamed if major work wasn't done on it. There was a beautiful article by Stacy Schiff where she was called in because of that. And Stacy Schiff is a Pulitzer-winning writer. And she took time out between books to get a little New Yorker money, and she did this article on Wikipedia that I thought was brilliant, to be honest. It wasn't a takedown. It was just here's this world, and here's its beliefs, and here's why this works and why they believe this, and it was a beautiful portrait. And I think what that did was that and other articles gave a realistic point of view. People stopped assuming from the outside that every transaction was positive, which was the illusion at the time. Now people work, they really want you to understand, there was the day that like Wikipedia made the bot that showed when people edited, okay? So it was a bot that you could go to a person and say, when are their editing times? And that's when they found how many people had multiple accounts. Because and places where one person would say this, and then the little Saki would come in and say, I agree too. And that flushed out a bunch of corruption by the use of this technology. So I think that's what, that was some of the stuff that happened. And I think that's just, we see that cycle now, it just plays faster with places like Uber and WeWork and so on, which I brought up before. But I mean, you know, the fact that an organization can't just blow smoke for very long before people finally go, you know, I was part of the Patreon problem. No, sorry, I wasn't the Patreon problem. I had a Patreon, and I watched how Patreon handled a change in their funding where they claimed it was for one reason, and they tried to get their people to say it was another, and people did research. They didn't just go, well, this is all for the good of everything. They asked questions. They researched it. They found citations. They found an interview with one of their staff members from 6 months earlier laying out his plan at some muckety-muck conference. And to wrap this all back and up from your face, I credit Wikipedia. I credit building an army, a legion, a group of people in the world who not only think critically, but also think smart and collaborate to find information. I think that's positive. I think that's an amazing thing to have happened, that so much of the populace can work so hard for something and not let themselves be told something is something until it is too late. Obviously, it can go off the rails, but we never had it on the rails to begin with, so it's a much better world. Go.